Execant. A piece of the fox's hide D-Day plus 14 days. When the hide of the lion will not reach, it must be patched with that of the fox. Lysandros of Sparta. On the 3rd day of July, the Northwest Republic State President Red Morehouse stood on a rise at the edge of the Lost Creek Forest in his camouflage fatigues. He slowly panned his binoculars over the besieged town in the distance. Morehouse could see the muzzle flashes of the Northwest Army's massed artillery firing all up and down the long valley, while inside the American-occupied town he could see the shells striking and flashing, and geysers of dirt and masonry and wreckage shooting high into the air, as well as occasional human bodies. Around Morehouse were parked the 3 groundhog-mounted projectors of a blue light battery, escorting his mobile command post to take care of any Predator drones or Tomahawk missiles that might amble by with the intent of whacking the Republic's head of state. He was surrounded as well by the SS company from the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler that served as the presidential protection detail in time of war, but there was no enemy nearby. Blue light had swept Hunter Wallace's missiles and aircraft from the sky, and his soldiers were boxed in down in the valley where they were being slowly slaughtered. Almost 75,000 U.S. Army soldiers and Marines, the bruised and exhausted remains of the U.S. Combined Military Group South that had so proudly rolled out of Billings several weeks before for what they thought would be Baghdad Boogie, were dug into an area of about 9 square miles of Anaconda, Montana, where they hunkered down, in whatever cover they could find, and crawled through the rubble of the town. Their lines of trenches, earthworks, barricades, and hasty fortifications ran roughly along Cable Road to the north through the old golf course, and along the Stumptown Road to the south as far east as Smelter Road. Everything in between was a kill zone for the NDF and the Luftwaffe, the mining and steel processing town of Anaconda, the only important Northwest industrial and administrative center to fall to the American enemy, was set in a heavily forested, mile-high valley in Deer Lodge County, surrounded by the Pintler Mountains, right on the Continental Divide. Anaconda's 15,000 inhabitants had been evacuated in time. The Americans had captured an empty town with the electrical and communications grid disabled, and the water and sewer mains blown to pieces by the NDF troops who had just left hours before. The stores and private homes were stripped of virtually everything to eat and drink, except for the odd bottle of beer and spring water left lying around, some of which were poisoned, and some of which weren't. The bewildered Americans had captured their first objective all right, but almost all of them were now on foot and exhausted after a hellish march in heavy kit and body armor through baking Montana heat, and they barely had time to get their bearings when the first shells from the 4th Army's artillery batteries concealed in the Lost Creek and Deer Lodge ranges began dropping on them. It took the Americans only a short while to realize that they were surrounded by an army that outnumbered them 3-1, that there would be no resupply by air, and that there was no food and above all very little water, while their enemies could draw as much water as they wanted from Georgetown Lake, Warm Springs Lake, and 100 other small lakes and streams scattered throughout the nearby mountains. Their commanding officer, U.S. Army Major General Bentley G. Logan, immediately ordered a breakout attack to the east, back the way they came. He led the U.S. Army's 1st Cavalry Division, the 1st Mechanized Infantry Division, and 2 battalions of the 5th Marine Division in a drive for Bowman Field, the local airport, where they hoped to establish an air supply point and a medevac point for their wounded, even if getting planes and copters through would be. The next problem. They captured the airfield, if it is possible to capture an open expanse of potholed concrete wherein every building had been dynamited or burned to the ground. Then the hail of artillery shells cut Logan off completely from the rest of his command. He and the remnants of his force were still dug into trenches they had hastily slashed into the ground around Bowman Field. Morehouse and the 4th Army Commander General A.J. Drones had not hesitated for an instant to order the destruction of one of the Republic's own cities that was defiled by the presence of a single armed nigger or Mexican. The NDF had been bombarding Anaconda for almost 5 days now, with over 2,000 artillery pieces and multiple rocket launchers, hundreds of Starfighter and Songbird aircraft, and mortars beyond counting. What was once the downtown area of Anaconda was now a burning slag heap, which even now as the state president watched was being churned up by the slow pounding of the shells. All along the siege lines, the northwest cannon were firing in slow sequences to conserve ammunition. They had all the time in the world. Each battery dropped 10 shells on a certain grid coordinate called in by the forward spotters, or in some cases the rear spotters high on the wooded ridges of the foothills above the valley, which afforded a better view. Then the next battery down the line did the same on another coordinate, until the wave came back around again. The result was an almost lazy but constant rain of explosives and incendiaries on the town, 24 hours a day, all day and night, for 5 days straight so far. The Americans were not only short on food and water, they had to be getting very little sleep. The barrage had slowly and leisurely disassembled the entire town. Barely one brick remained standing on another, and the Americans were huddled in trenches or cellars or gutted ruins with no way to fire back and silence the constant thudding guns. The lack of their air power and satellite surveillance had allowed the poor quality of the American troops and the low caliber of officers and leadership, for many decades always hidden behind a screen of high-tech razzle-dazzle, to come to the fore. Now the U.S. military paid the price for generations of political correctness, tactical laziness, and moral corruption. Low-tech in sufficient quantity and with guts. Behind it was trumping high-tech manipulated by monkeys. Man was triumphing over machine, courage over the computer. World War I was indeed defeating World War III. Most of the trees throughout the valley had been knocked down by various kinds of ordnance over the past few days, and large numbers of troops from the 350,000-man 4th Army weren't even engaged in combat, but were on firefighting duty putting out the dozens of brush fires that threatened to spread from the battle zone. The sights spread out below Morehouse now resembled a shell-blasted moonscape that shimmered in the July heat even through the smoke and the dust thrown up by the NDF artillery shells. "How long before those poor bastards run out of water, you think, General?" Morehouse asked A.J. Drones, a wiry man with a drooping blonde mustache laced with gray who stood at his side. "No telling, Mr. President, but they're starting to get desperate," said Drones. "Some of the white soldiers are starting to crawl out of their positions at night, trying to surrender. We shoot 'em down as per order. I would imagine a shortage of food and water is largely in play with that. Any chance of reconsidering your diguello, Mr. President?" asked Security Minister Frank Barrow, also standing beside Morehouse with a pair of field glasses. "Those men down there are our enemies, granted, but a lot of them are of our own race." "Not with this lot," said Morehouse. "Frank, believe me, I've lost sleep over that, and I'm going to lose more now that I've seen what those men are enduring, no matter what color they are. But the United States of America has sent 3 invading armies into our land, and we dare not show weakness or hold our hand. We have to completely destroy at least one of those armies in order to make our point, so that when we do show mercy to the white men among the other 2, the world will know that's what it is, mercy and not weakness. If we can, we'll offer the white soldiers of Group Center and Group North a chance to live. But to do so they'll have to acknowledge their own blood, maybe for the first time in their lives, and abandon their niggers and their mud-colored allies. That's the political point we have to make, and make them understand. We have to force them to accept their lives at our hands as white men, and not as soldiers of an illegitimate interracial tyranny. That's what history must record, that we showed mercy not to Americans but to our own blood brothers. So what have you come all the way out here to tell me? This is sufficiently sensitive, so I didn't want to entrust it even to a secure line, sir," said Barrow. "We've got word from Station Cesspool. Major Cardinale says he's worked out a plan to take down both of Wallace's Hofjuden, but he warns us that Belladonna herself may be compromised, and he's very twitchy about that, as well he might be. We can't afford to lose her. He's asking for confirmation to proceed. Those 2 Jews are urging the President of the United States to use nuclear weapons against the Northwest American Republic," said Morehouse. "Hunter Wallace is a clever politician but a weak man. He thinks only in terms of political expediency. The morality of slaughtering hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of his own race at the behest of Jews is something that simply will not enter into his calculations. I can't take the risk that he will allow himself to be persuaded by those Hebes. We must not only remove him from their sphere of influence, but we have to let him know through their death that we know what they've been up to. And if he even so much as thinks about pushing that button, he's next. And not the entire might of the United States can save him from our wrath. The man is a personal coward, and we have to hope that the death of his 2 little Jewish handlers will concentrate his mind. I realize the risk to that brave young woman in the White House, but I have a whole nation and a whole new generation of white children to think about, children whom I will not allow to die of nuclear incineration or radiation poisoning. No more Dresdens, Frank, no more Hamburgs or Colognes, no more Wilhelm Gustloffs, not ever, at least not without an Aryan revenge that will shake the very heavens. But we don't want revenge. We want live white children, and that means we have to stop it before it can happen. Tell Cardinale he's got my okay, and I don't mean just the 2 Jewish advisors. From now on, he's got my okay to take out Wallace himself if the opportunity offers. You want to turn Belladonna from an intel to an assassination mission, sir? Asked Barrow. Yes, if it's feasible, and if there is at least a chance to extract that girl and get her out of there alive beforehand, said Morehouse with a nod. In the past 2 weeks I have had to order thousands of men to their deaths, but I won't do that to her. That would be a damned foul way to repay what she's done for us, and I still intend to maintain at least some shred of pretense that we're better than they are. Tell Vince it's a go on taking out Wallace, but he prioritizes Belladonna's safety and her extraction with her child. Wallace would kill you without a second's hesitation if he could, sir, offered Drones. I know, Andrew, but that's not why I'm giving this order, said Morehouse. The thought of using those nukes has now crossed his mind, and no American president who has ever had such a thought even so much as cross his mind can be allowed to live. It's like a dog that starts killing chickens or savaging sheep. It doesn't matter how well behaved such a dog is normally. Once he understands that it can be done, he has to be put down. We're go on Heron and Schiff, and we also have a green light to kill the president if we can do so and still save the lady, Vince Cardinale told his Belladonna team several hours later. They were gathered in Birdie's basement computer center in Arlington. Bird had proven himself to be loyal and invaluable since the war began, and Cardinale had taken the chance of bringing him up to speed on the main operation itself, although he withheld the actual identity of the WPB spy inside the White House from him. It's simple, Vinny, Birdie had told him. Beatings, buggery, and waterboarding I can take, but when the electrodes go on my balls, that's when I start singing like a canary. Those are your parameters, so work within them. Bird had provided the team with 2 electronic devices, microglobal positioning indicators the size of a thumbnail that had to be planted somewhere on Angela Heron and Ronald Schiff's person so the WPB hit teams could locate and track down their targets. Doc, were you able to move her head tuning appointment up? Asked Vinny Skins. Yes, it seems I had an unavoidable scheduling conflict. She'll be there for her weekly therapy session at 6 p.m. tonight, said Shapira. Or as soon thereafter as the leader of the free world gets through with his afternoon orgy. I don't like doing it, though. It's a break-in pattern that the Secret Service might notice, especially after the fireworks tonight. But I know we have to give her these tracking devices and hope to God she can plant them. So she can be back in the White House by what, 7:20? Asked Cardinale. Yes, said Shapira. The late briefing in the Situation Room for their war cabinet always starts at 9, and it's usually over by 10:30 or 11. Then the staff generally leave the buildings for sleep or for dissipations elsewhere, said Bobrici, reciting from memory some of the wealth of information and White House gossip he'd picked up from Georgia. Neither of the targets overnight much at the White House, although they do have guest bedrooms assigned in the residence for that purpose. Angela Heron generally goes right home to her pad on 12th Street Northeast in Brooklyn, where a couple of nights in the week she receives whatever lover she's getting it on with at the moment. She runs through them like a dose of salts, all white, all Gentiles, everyone from low-level lawyers to baristas to garage mechanics, guys who have credible deniability and won't be missed if she decides to cut their throats during sex play or whatever she does. Apparently she's quite the Black Widow. These guys either leave by 2 a.m., or in some cases they don't leave at all. According to West Wing gossip, she's supposed to be fucking her bodyguard as well, some Israeli thug named Mordecai Kravitsky, who helps her dump the bodies of her other toy boys up in some landfill in Prince George's County, where they never seem to get found until they're too decomposed for forensics, as if anybody would investigate anyway. White bodies turn up all over Maryland all the time, grunted Cardinale. The cops are all niggers, so no one gives a damn. This guy Kravitsky is ex-Mossad, and he's usually her sole security, Bob went on. Ronald Schiff, the White House chief of staff, either goes home or he calls into his wife in Georgetown claiming he's working late, and then he goes clubbing along with a couple of his Secret Service detail who also like to boogie. We might be able to catch him and take him down in Muldoon's pub or the Wile E. Coyote. Sometimes he picks up a shiksa and he ends up in the Watergate complex, in one of those special fuck pads various power elite types maintain there. Yes, I know about them, said Shapira. They're in a different part of the complex, and the whole area is not only monitored but guarded by top-end, armed private security. It's a lot more locked down than the office area where I am. Our lords and masters want to make sure they're not interrupted in mid-debauch. Bob went on. The thing is, George is supposed to be kicking back in the residence upstairs in the East Wing at night, while she waits for her second shift, so to speak, not wandering around the West Wing schmoozing or chatting with people, especially not cabinet people and senior poobahs like the press secretary and chief of staff, especially not during a war crisis when the place is on full security alert. Remember, for all her technical status as an employee and her full access ID card, everybody knows who Georgia is and what she's there for, and she's considered to be maybe one cut above the help. Some of them probably think she's lower than the help, and our two hose-noses seem to be in that category. Georgia may be able to get next to the president on a regular basis, but so far as she can recall, neither Heron nor Schiff have ever even acknowledged her existence or addressed a single word to her. She can't just walk into their offices for a conversation. She just plain might not be able to do this for us, even if she's willing. She might not be able to find a way to get close to the targets. We have to see if she's willing first, said Cardinale. That means you three have a whole hour to persuade her to plant the tracking devices. He nodded at Shapira, Bob Campbell, and Betsy. He was sending in the whole crew who were known to Georgia to persuade and reassure her, because the mission was now being taken to a new and dangerous level. Is she going to go for it? I think she will, said Betsy confidently. She's packing a lot of resentment, right back to the time when that bitch mother of hers kidnapped her. When people treat a woman like the inhabitants of this toilet have treated her, she'll do anything to hit back any way she can. Bob reflected grimly that in light of his newly acquired knowledge of her past, Betsy undoubtedly knew what she was talking about. Richie? Asked Cardinale. I'm not sure, sir, Bob said in a worried voice. She's on edge, and this wasn't what she signed up for. Tell her I know that, said Cardinale. Tell her whatever you have, too, but you've got to get her to do it. Or at least try. Otherwise, we're going to have to intercept both of those Red Sea pedestrians and pull off 2 floats right in the green zone. We'll do that if we have to, in order to stop them from whispering sweet nuclear nothings in the president's ear. But it's going to get dicey under the best of circumstances. We're taking anti-tank weapons that can breach the armor in their limos. But if we have to take them on the fly, our own E&E will be problematic. Bob knew that the CO was understating the case. 2 spontaneous and bloody attacks against the White House press secretary and chief of staff right on the streets of Washington, D.C., in the middle of the ESMA and under the surveillance cameras, would set off the capital city's entire emergency response protocol and bring down on them everything from the FBI and D.C. Metro Police SWAT teams to the Special Delta Force unit standing by at Fort Belvoir. The city would be locked down tight within 3 minutes. Any escape from the spy cameras on every corner would become impossible, and the whole thing would become even more of a suicide mission than it already was. The circus operatives had to have some way to track and locate both targets, so they could plan their strike and work out some kind of getaway that might give them a chance. Byrd had promised to do what he could to hack and take out the surveillance cameras in both immediate contact points when it went down, and to cover the gunner's escape and evasion. But in order to do that, he had to know where it was to happen. He needed some idea of the getaway route, and he had to receive at least a little advance notice. You said you're authorizing us to promise her. Extraction after tonight, sir? Asked Bob keenly. You don't want to use her to set up Hunter Wallace himself for assassination? That's affirmative, said Cardinale. The president, our president, not the tubby little pervert, has ordered specifically that we are not to place her in any more danger than is absolutely unavoidable. We made this woman a promise for her and her child, and we're going to keep it. I agree with that order, and not just on moral grounds. It would be too dangerous to hit Wallace, leaving her in place and hoping she could brazen it out when the heat comes on. It will be a near enough thing when we take out these two kikes tonight, and the whole security system freaks out in a St. Vitus's dance of paranoia. We'll find some other way to bake the doughboy. If nothing else, Duke and I both are pretty good shots, and a bullet has a hell of a range. The son of a bitch can't hide over there in the Oval Office forever. He'll have to show his face sooner or later, and one day when he does, he'll have no more face left to show. A bit later, Bob and Betsy drove across the river into the green zone in his car and parked in the Watergate's underground lot. Betsy took Bob's hand as if he was a boyfriend or a trick and led him giggling and jiggling to a certain elevator that was just out of range of the CCTV cameras. They both slipped into a utility closet using a forged passcard that opened the door without registering on the building's door access log in the Watergate security control room. An invention of Birdie's that had revitalized the American burglary industry and, on its own, had already made him a millionaire through underworld sales. Although, of course, being a millionaire didn't mean all that much anymore. What with the inflation? The utility closet opened into a disused workshop, something that the security designers for the complex seemed to have forgotten. 5 minutes later, having followed a circuitous route of great complexity that avoided every single camera, they sat in Dr. Jake Shapira's consulting room. Shapira himself came in through the front entrance. At 7 o'clock, they were joined by Georgia Myers for her weekly session of bitching about how President of the United States or not, she wasn't paid enough for all the leather-loving and ancient Roman role-playing involved in doing her duty to her country. At least, that's what Shapira reported back. To the Secret Service that she was saying, Georgia was wearing a yellow pastel blouse, brown leather skirt, and sandals tonight, all of which got ash on them as she sat chain-smoking cigarette after cigarette. Her face was still beautiful, but she was pale and haggard, and her movements were brittle and jerky. Bob was right in his assessment. The pressure was starting to tell on her. We have to get her out of there soon, or they're going to notice, Bob thought urgently to himself. Emergency meeting with all three of you guys tonight? Georgia remarked, arching her eyebrows. Something must be up, and I can guess what. The nuke thing? We've got some good news and some bad news, Georgia. Opened the zombie master. We think your Mata Hari gig over there at 1600 may well be almost done. We do need a couple more specific things from you, and yes, they do concern the disturbing possibility of a nuclear strike on the Republic. When this last assignment is done, in our assessment, it will be too dangerous for you to stay over there any longer, and we haven't forgotten our promise to you. Are you ready to clear out? You mean it? She asked, looking at Bob. He nodded. She exhaled smoke and seemed to slump in her chair. Yes, I'm ready. God, am I ready to see Montana again? We've got some trespassers there right now that we need to clear out first, but looks like that will just be a matter of time, said Bob. We're winning on every front, or at least holding them. Yes, it's time, Georgia, said Shapira. You'll be extracted, and you and your daughter will be taken to a safe house far away from D.C. You can ride out the war there, and once it's safe, you and Allura can finally go home. With the thanks of a grateful nation, might I add. Now, these last little things you want me to do? Probed Georgia, immediately spotting the hook in the bait. Bob picked up the ball. Georgia, our original intention was never to have you actually do anything overt, he said gently. Just pass information on to us. But you know now what's at stake. If those two kikes, Angela Herron and Ronald Schiff, are left with unfettered access to the president, given the way the American military is losing the war, they will eventually persuade him to launch America's nuclear arsenal at the Northwest Republic. There now seems to be no doubt that we can. Beat these swine in open battle, thanks to our ability to knock out their air power and their satellite surveillance, and force them to take us on man-to-man on the ground. But the terrible destruction of even a few atomic warheads going off anywhere in the Republic would overwhelm all our emergency services and preparations, and would be more than we could cope with. I honestly don't know what would happen, except that it would unleash our own version of the apocalypse option in retaliation, which means full-blown gas and bio attacks all over the United States. The amount of death and destruction that will follow if Hunter Wallace gives that order is beyond human calculation. The effects of the radiation alone will last for generations and will spread over half the world. Not that anyone over there at 1600 gives a damn. Large portions of the Republic could well become uninhabitable. No one questions your courage, Georgia. You've proven that time and again over the past couple of months. You're going to kill the president, and you want me to help, said Georgia baldly. No, said Bob, shaking his head. We wouldn't do anything like that with you still over there in the White House. That would be throwing you to the wolves, and we don't do that to our own. The Secret Service and the whole regime would go berserk and start lashing out in all directions, and you would be the first one dragged under the microscope. Even if they didn't suspect you outright, they'd probably give you the whole truth serum and torture cocktail just on general principles. No, we want you to do just two things for us, Georgia. Difficult tasks, to be sure, but then you're out of there. You stroll out the side portico tomorrow morning just like usual. I pick you up, we go get Allura, and we're out of here. My mom and her servants won't just let me walk into the house on K Street and take Allura, said Georgia, quietly excited by the prospect. Betsy and I will be going with you, and we have no intention of asking their permission, said Bob. Do you want me to cut Halberstam's throat if he's there? Asked Betsy. Georgia looked at her, startled, realizing that she was dead serious. Come to that, I don't care what you do to Marvin, but Bobby, please don't hurt my mom, she said. Even after what she did to you, George? Asked Betsy. I thought you hated her guts? Not enough to want her dead, said Georgia. Well, yeah, enough to want her dead, but what can I tell you? She's my mother. You only get one, you know. Yes, I know, said Betsy, her face expressionless. Bob almost winced, but instead he went on. Okay, I won't hurt Amber, although we may have to restrain her in order to get your child. Now down to the nitty-gritty. We're not going to kill the president, Georgia. We're going to kill a couple of Jews, Angela Herron and Ronald Schiff. You know why. They intend to murder millions of our own. They will glory in those deaths, and they will be praised through all of Zion if we allow that to happen. But we're not. They have raised their hand against the true chosen people of divine cosmic destiny, and for that, they will die. If there really is any moral order in the universe, their souls will be burning in hell this time tomorrow. We're going to do it tonight, before they can persuade Hunter Wallace to push that damned button and send nuclear warheads flying towards the homeland and slaughter millions of white people, like it was some kind of goddamned Purim festival. But we will need your help. You need my help to take 2 human lives? Asked Georgia. No, we need your help to take 2 Jewish lives, Bob told her. You know these creatures, Georgia. Which is better, that 2 of them should die or that possibly millions of white people die if our blue lights can't stop all those ICBMs aimed at Seattle and Portland and Boise and Missoula? Marvin Halberstam is a lech who can't keep his hands off me, and he keeps my mom drunk and doped up so she wouldn't find out what he's doing with Grandma's money, said Georgia with a shrug, taking a drag on her cigarette. Angela and Ronald are assholes. They look at me like I'm a whore. I am, but it isn't up to them to remind me of the fact. If they had ever even bothered to be polite to me, I might hesitate. But those 2, fuck 'em. I've known dozens of Jews in the past 12 years, and not one of them was a nice person. They're nasty and creepy insects, and they need to be stomped on. I know I should be helping you out of love of country and love of race, and because of what these people are doing to Montana right now. But thanks to my mother, I was raised as a petty and self-centered American, and so I'll help you kill them for petty and self-centered American reasons. Congratulations, Mom. You got the red, white, and blue daughter you always wanted. Yay. It's better to do the right thing for the wrong reasons than to do the wrong thing for any reason, said the zombie master philosophically. What exactly do you want me to do? Asked Georgia. Bob quickly ran the situation down for her and showed her the 2 global positioning chips. They are all silicon, plastic, and graphite with no metal parts or filaments or anything like that, so they won't trip a metal detector as you go in, he explained. You see, one has a little blue strip on it, and one red. That's so we can differentiate the signals. They're already activated. All you need to do is place them somewhere on Angela Herron and Ronald Schiff, and then use your phone to let us know which color you placed on which target, so our guys will know who they're following. The best way would be in something they wear or carry, in her purse, in his jacket pocket, in his hat if he wears one. Something that we know will stay with them. Failing that, plant it in one of their briefcases if you can get near it. Something like that. Then when they leave the White House, we will be able to follow them, run them down, and take them out. Georgia shook her head. Bobby, that's going to be real hard to do without it standing out like a sore thumb that I'm up to something, that I'm somewhere I've got no business being and fumbling around with people's stuff. I'll try. I really will. I get how important this is, but you have to understand, the White House is a very stratified place, and I'm on the very lowest level despite the fact that I see more of Hunter than his cabinet or his staff does. It's ironic that I could probably plant one of these on the president himself with no trouble, but not an upper staff member. Could you arrange to bump into Angela Heron in the ladies' room? Suggested the zombie master. Maybe, but the problem is all the goddamned cameras in every corridor, Georgia told them. I'd have to more or less follow her around the halls waiting for her to step into the John, and the Secret Service monitoring the cameras from the basement would notice. I'm supposed to go right up to the residence when I get back tonight. I can maybe find some excuse to go back down to the West Wing, say I forgot my lipstick or something, but it would be pretty thin. The people watching her over there aren't just gunmen, you know, said the doctor. Those agents are trained in psychology as well, how to establish patterns of behavior in the subjects they observe and spot breaks in those patterns. Any action that looks out of the norm. I'll tell you what might be doable, said Georgia. I might be able to get it onto that big Jew leg breaker who sticks to Angela like glue, Monty, and maybe into the pocket of one of Schiff's Secret Service detail. Bob sighed. Georgia, do what you can. Remember, one way or the other, this is your last night over there. When you leave tomorrow, you leave for good. That means that as long as you don't do anything that will bring them down on you right that very second, you won't have to do any explaining later on. That's all the advice I can give you. He looked at Betsy and Shapira. Can you give us a minute, comrades? He asked. Sure, said Betsy. Both of them stood up and left the room. This has been hard as hell for you, Peanut, said Bob, taking George's hand. I know that. But what you've done has been the right thing. It's been important. What happens if I can't do it? She asked. Suppose I can't plant those tracking bugs? Then you can't do it, and our guys have to more or less pull off a kamikaze charge somewhere on the street out there and hope they can get the job done. If they miss and either of those two Hebes survives, they will know what it's about. One or both of them will be dragging you and Wallace out of bed in the wee hours of this morning, terrified out of their wits from a near miss, and screaming every argument and every threat they can to make him call for that damned briefcase with the nuclear codes in it and give the order to push the big red button. Just to save their own wretched lives, they will murder millions. That's the kind of people we're dealing with. Believe me, Bobby, after 3 months in that place I know what kind of people we're dealing with, said Georgia. I grew up in this town more or less, and I've always known that the people who rule the United States were corrupt and narcissistic and completely amoral. I mean, hey, how can you live anywhere in America and not know that, if you're paying any kind of attention? But I've never seen it close up like this before, Bobby. There's a kind of, Jesus, I don't know how to describe it. There's a kind of poison in the air over there at the White House. It's what it must be like when you're at the bottom of the sea in a sunken submarine or a diving bell and the air starts to run out and go bad. It's like everybody in that place is quietly suffocating in an overpowering smell of shit. Years of it, generations of it, stacked up layer after layer, decade after decade, generation after generation.
I don't know if I believe in ghosts and hauntings or that kind of thing, but I've seen on these ghost hunter shows about how negative energy can build up in places like the White House, all the pain and greed and anger and hatred kind of sinking into the walls and getting absorbed by the floorboards and the carpets, until the very wood and stone become evil. That's the feeling I get over there. Sorry, I know you're probably wondering if I've lost it. No, I don't think that, said Bob, still holding her hand. I understand exactly what you're saying. I'm just sorry as hell I had to come back into your life like this and send you into that place, Peanut. But tomorrow it will be over, or at least your part in it will be done, if you can just be strong and smart and get this done for us tonight. While the meeting in Shapira's office was going on, Major Vince Cardinale quietly infiltrated 2 armed teams of WPB assassins into the District of Columbia, bringing them in separately over all 5 bridges. The dispositions were similar to what had been done on the night of the close encounter outside the South African embassy. The first,
Hit team consisted of Duke, Captain Frederick Fitzpatrick, Tricia, Lieutenant Alice Waters, and Little John, Lieutenant John Kramer. The second team included Junebug, Captain Alvin Rossbach, Frankie G., Captain Frank Giardello, Rudy the Clown, Lieutenant Rudolph Heinlein, and Lieutenant Reg Williamson, who had at one time, as part of his criminal cover, been nicknamed Fur-Face Reggie, but objected to the point where Cardinale thought best to drop it.
Cardinale himself, Betsy Elizabeth Paris is in Chicago. Richie, Lieutenant Robert Campbell Jr., NCG, provided a third team for emergency backup and scouting. It was still light out, and they all met in the guise of an after-work picnic party gathered around a green wooden table at the National Mall, in the shadow of the Washington Monument. Richie and Betsy arrived to find the picnic table spread with politically correct quiche, potato salad, and cheese tofu sandwiches on heavy-grained bread that tasted like cardboard. "You should have let me at least bring some fried chicken, boss," said Duke reproachfully. "Vegetarian picnics really suck. Fried chicken is also illegal, and we don't want some asshole cop strolling by who's bored and decides he has nothing better to do than enforce the law," said Cardinale. His phone beeped and he checked a quick text message in code on his screen. Okay, that was Birdie. He says he's reprogrammed those two cameras to our right and left to alter their panning arcs just enough so we won't show on the monitor. Hopefully none of those niggers at DHS will notice the change, and if they do, they'll most likely just send a crew out to check the cameras first. Anyway, we shouldn't be here that long. Now listen up. They all bent around the picnic table and fumbled with bits and pieces of quiche and soft drinks to make it look to any observers as if they were eating. "Duke, Tricia, and Johnny are red team," said Cardinale. "You will intercept and take out the Heron bitch. She should be leaving in a black Mercedes Supersec limo, government special issue for big cheeses. Those rides have full armor plating and bulletproof glass, 0 to 120 in 10 seconds flat, anti-caltrop radial tires, and mine-proofed under chassis, the works, so try not to chase it, because you'll be in for a long, hard chase and that Israeli might be good enough at his job to lose you. If Angie Baby runs true to form, she will have only Kravitsky as her chauffeur and bodyguard, but do not assume that means an easy target. The Mossad were and are some of the most vicious trained killers in the world. We have to assume this big yid can shoot and hit what he aims at, and that he knows his kung fu, so don't cut him any slack, Duke. Take him out quick and at a distance if you get the chance." "Roger that, sir," said Duke. "We hope to get tracker bugs planted on both targets, but that may not be possible," Vinny told them. "Birdie thinks he can hack into the White House security cameras themselves, but he's never tried before and he's not sure. In addition to which, they have all kinds of security software, including some he may not be familiar with, and they might pick up on his hack. I've had Comrade Bird change position for tonight. He'll be working from a hotel room in case they breach his firewalls and track down his hack. Hopefully, if that happens, he'll have enough warning to make a break for it. I hope not, because we can't afford to lose him, or any of you for that matter. Anyway, if our asset can't place the tracking devices, but if Birdie can in fact get into the White House security system, he'll be able to spot Kravitsky picking up Heron's limo in the underground parking garage beneath the executive office building just before the War Cabinet meeting breaks up, and so he can tell us when she's leaving. Ditto Ronald Schiff, White House Chief of Staff, who usually travels with 2 limos, one of which is a decoy, and a minimum of 4 Secret Service bodyguards. Birdie should be able to spot which limo he's in, which we'll need to know if we're going to hit the vehicle with a Panzerfaust. If we get the GPS bugs in place, we track the targets with Birdie's help." Cardinale continued. "If not, we just follow them around until we've both got clear shots at the car, or as clear as we can get in the middle of a city street at night. If you see the targets getting out of the vehicles and exposing themselves at a nightclub or anything like that, or if you get a good close shot with a rocket or a grenade, go ahead and take it immediately. Otherwise, on my command, we make simultaneous strikes with everything we've got. Let's see if we can confuse the enemy responders by giving them 2 major alarms at once. Once it's done, you guys break contact with the scene and get to cover, an alleyway, underground garage, wherever you're out of eyesight. We will have to assume that the enemy has caught your cars on digital, and they will issue bolos for them, so detonate your vehicles with all your weapons except for your handguns inside.
The feds will think there are car bombs going off, and that will add to the confusion. Go to your end points on foot, as carefully but as quickly as possible. Pick up your secondary transport and try to make it out of the ESMA. Back into Virginia, if you can, into Maryland if you must. If they have the checkpoints sealed off, either run them in your cars or try and make it out of the ESMA on foot. Stay away from the metro, those will be the first exits sealed off. Swim the damned Potomac if you have to. We need everybody off camera as soon as possible. Better to have you guys scrapping with nigger gangbangers or nigger Maryland cops than being chased by FBI and real cops down here. Wounded? Asked Duke laconically. You all know Shangri-La? They all nodded except Bob Campbell. No, you don't, Richie. It's a safe house on J Street we use sometimes. Doc Shapiro will be there with emergency medical aid. I originally tried to veto that, but he insisted. For some reason he thinks enough of you apes not to want to let you die, even if his cover gets compromised. Hopefully it won't be necessary. Any more questions? Junebug raised his hand. Sir, what if at this war cabinet session tonight the two kikes are able to convince Wallace to order a nuclear strike on the Republic? Then we're too late and we will be citizens of a country that has ceased to exist, said Cardinale bleakly. We then spend whatever lives remain to us here in this city, killing everyone who was even remotely involved in destroying the last hope of the world, killing them in as painful manner as possible. I don't know what else to tell you, June. We have to stop these two Jews now, tonight. These evil things have been whispering in the ear of powerful men of our race for centuries, and the consequences have been terrible beyond comprehension. They cannot be allowed to do this. If there was any way we could storm the White House by force, get at the Jews and kill them, then I'd order it, even if it meant none of us got out alive. Where will you and Betsy be, boss? Asked Duke. Betsy and I will be on the move in my Cadillac to provide emergency backup and support to either team that needs it. We'll act as a second surveillance car, a second attack car, or we'll extract any of you who end up on foot. Where do you want me? Asked Bob Ritchie. I have a special assignment for you. The rest of you, start moving back to your vehicles now. All of us have been clustered here for too long. Get out of the mall, get mobile, and start cruising, circling, a good long radius around 1600. Stay loose and ready to move, in case either target decides to cut out of the situation briefing early. When the rest of the team were gone except for himself and Betsy, Cardinale said, Rich, how's your art appreciation? I beg your pardon, sir? Asked Campbell. You need to take a cruise over to Pennsylvania Avenue, drive past 1600, and stop at 1661, Cardinale told him. It will be a 2-story red brick building, the Renwick Gallery. It's an annex of the Smithsonian Institution, housing part of its collection of early American art. Put this on your windshield. Cardinale reached into his jacket pocket and brought out a blue and white plastic decal. Holy Moses, that's a Federal Zone parking sticker, exclaimed Bob. Is this the real thing? It will pass the Metro and FBI databases if anyone checks it, let's put it that way, said Cardinale dryly. And yes, it cost even more than that Class A Fleck card we got for you. There is a small parking lot behind the Renwick that you will access off 17th Street. The first access code I wrote on the back there will get you in and out of the automatic gate. Once you park, you use that second code on the rear door. The cameras will be conveniently malfunctioning in both the lot and the building, but use caution anyway. There's only one person in there who needs to see you. Go down the corridor to the office on your far left, and you will meet a little guy who looks like he's about 100 years old. He's Dr. Herrick, the curator of the gallery, and probably the Northwest Republic's longest-serving agent in the United States. He was personally converted by the old man himself, way back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth. He will show you to an observation post where you can keep an eye on 1600, see if there's any unusual movement or anything of the kind, and be ready to pick up Belladonna on the fly if she hollers rainstorm. Rainstorm was George's coded emergency distress call. It meant she was in trouble and needed an immediate extraction. The problem was that she would first have to make it out of the White House on her own and then get to one of the extraction points, either Mickey Mouse, which was across Lafayette Square at 16th and H Streets and would be indicated by a texted picture of the famous cartoon rodent, or else Donald Duck, which was on the corner of 15th and F, in front of the Treasury Department. If she totally lost contact due to her special phone being confiscated, lost, or destroyed, she had to make it to a public computer terminal to use email or get hold of an unsecured phone, preferably a Mighty Mart disposable. But all of these paled beside the obstacle of getting out of the White House once she'd been discovered and exposed as a spy. Ever since the Clinton years, the White House had been equipped with several private cells and a soundproof interrogation room in the sub-basement near the security control room, where the Secret Service, and sometimes the president himself or herself, could conduct private and discreet questioning and attitude adjustment sessions with anyone they so desired and could lure into the White House. Hillary Clinton had damned near lived down there, and despite her public feminism, like all female rulers, she was reputed to be especially cruel to women who crossed her. Practically speaking, if she was caught inside 1600 Pennsylvania, Georgia wasn't coming out again. Casualty summary as of July 3rd. NDF military casualties, 4,220 dead and 9,436 wounded. NAR civilian casualties, 2,804 dead and 4,312 wounded. United States military casualties, 72,642 dead and 100,657 wounded. United States civilian casualties, 138,464 dead and 368,826 wounded, gassed or ill from biowar agents. Casualties overwhelmingly non-white. Aslan military casualties, Est, approx. 192,000 dead, 164,000 wounded, including those killed in Aslan civil conflict beginning around June 30. Aslan civilian casualties, unknown number wounded, gassed or ill from biowar agents, or killed in civil unrest during the collapse of